This is the application. We want to do a gas sales application. It's the default template. I have just started the application. So let's do away with this part of code. We can retain this and rename this to so that we have a screen called login where we want to start. Let's do that screen right here. The stateless widget. Stateless. Login. Right here, we want to develop the user interface for login. So I'll just start with a column. I'll have a text view here. Text. Text style. We can have font size 20. Font weight. Font weight bold. This is the title really. So this is the title of the screen. Okay. Need to wrap this with scaffold. Then this will be body. Okay. Kind of sized box here. Height 100. Okay. This 80 will do. Then we can have can align this to the entire of the column, cross-axis alignment to center. Cross-axis alignment to center, scaffold. Actually make this bigger. Okay. Let's remove the debug banner here. Find this still big. Okay. I'll wrap this with some padding so that it moves. And only focus on one side, on the right. Sorry, I meant left. Now I want to put in the widgets, the text fields here, right here, actually below this. Text field 1, text field again, right. Let me wrap this with another column so that it's easy to manipulate them together. I will wrap this with padding again. Symmetric. Horizontal. 30. Vertical. 10. This is column. Okay. Right size box here. Height. That's big. Let's do 50. Okay, let's have a button here. After this, material button. On pressed, we can have an anonymous empty function for now. Then child, we can have text. Again, seem to be missing something here. Okay, we need it. Where is constant? We can do away with this. Okay. So this is what we have. Let me look at the appearance. We need to do some more work on the button. Let's change the color. Let's use one of the colors here, blue. Another size box here. Can have this button. Let's increase this padding. Yeah, let's bring the entire of these views to the center. So again, I will wrap this with center, where I have the column that contains the two text fields. I wrap it with center. Well, we could have used this main axis alignment, and set it to center. This might now be useless, so we can remove it. Okay, so let's use this to initiate logging from the database, so that when you click here, this logs you in from the database. So now I will go to the database side and create a database for this particular operation. Okay, so let's go to the database side, databases. I'll create a database called gas cells, create the database. Excuse me. Create a user, use the same name, gas cells. You can generate a password here. I'll use this. Sorry, generate password and copy that. Create the user. Go back. Then add that user to the database. So a user called gas cells to a database called gas cells. Add. Then give that user the privileges. I've allowed all the privileges for that user on that database. That's done. We can now go to the database and create an account, a table. So to do that, we go to my PHP my admin so that we can see that particular database. PHP my admin. Let's look at the database we just created, gas cells here. Let's open that. Create a table called users. We can start with 4 columns. We can add others if we need to. Let me use 5. I will create more if I need to. First is the ID. I had explained this. So increment. Then first name, which is varchar 20 or 30. Second name, varchar 30 again. I will assume that the primary key in my application is the phone. Then we can now have a column called created at. This column created at is timestamp or date and time. So I will click on change to modify that. This should be date and time. Now, I want to have, let me change this. There must have been a problem here. This is date and time. For date and time, we don't specify the length. Also, phone is the primary key, so let's put that in. You can make it unique or make it primary key under index. Where is index? Okay, we might need to go to the entire table structure here. Check all. In fact, even from here, we can do that. Phone, make primary. Yes. Okay, I will just make it unique. implication is the same. Right. Now we have our table here, which has no data. Let me add, before we add in some records, look at this. Our application has different types of users. We are dealing with gas sales. There is the person who comes in to buy gas, call him a customer, but there is a person who owns the entire system with the admin. So what do we do in this table to create that difference? We can just go to the structure and create one more column called role. So add a column after, it could come after phone, really anywhere, it has no impact or difference. Add role. So regardless of the number of roles you have or different types of users, you should not create different tables for users where the only difference is the role they are playing. So this is integer, it's just 1 or 2 really, and the default here, by default, everyone will be 0. 0 is any other user. If we take it to admin, that now becomes 1. So let's save this. Let's create in a few records in this table. I realize we did not create a column for password. We can do that. So back to structure. After all, we can have another column after all, password. Please notice this password will be hashed and therefore it will not be integer, it will be varchar. And after hashing, it will not be like the 5 characters the user might enter when creating a password. So I want us to use hashing method called MD5. There are other methods that you can use, and I'm sure you might have talked about this in your classes. So I will just type MD hash size so that I have an idea of the number of characters that I might need in characters. It says each MD hash looks like 32 numbers and letters, but each digit is, I'm just interested in the characters. I can see that 32 will do. 32 will do. Is always 128 bits. If you encode 4 bits, giving you 32 characters. So all I need is to create 32 characters here. The rest can leave them as they are. So this is our user table now. Let me create some random records here. ID, it's auto increment, so we leave it. James Katana 0721589325. That's my number. Can assume the role remains as 0. For password, for now, we can leave it blank. Just create that particular record. We now want to use this to log in. We want to use this to log in. Well, let me do one more thing. Online MD5 hash encrypt, because I need to supply a password right there in the database, which is hashed already. So I'm just looking for a way to hash that. I will assume my password is 1245, human readable, and then generate the hashed. This is the hashed, this one, MD hash. I'll copy this and store it in my database here. Good. The other thing that has been validated, maybe we should have counted these characters to see whether they are 32. Okay, copy. Word character count online, so that we next time we are dealing with this, we know we should always have 32 characters if we want to. Yeah, 32 characters. That's exactly what we read on the other side. Good. We have a user who has a password. That is done. So now let's take care of the equivalent of our API that would help us handle that particular login logic. So file manager here, file manager here. I'll create a folder, call it gas cells, gas cells. We agreed that one of the files we need to create inside gas cells is a file called, we are creating PHP scripts here. We've done this in class. So we start with connect.php, and we edit this. We put in the logic for the connection. You have that with you. So I'll go get it here. Connect.php, this one, get it. Unfortunately, I have forgotten my password. I did not save it, so I'll need to go back to my cPanel where I have users. That's under MySQL databases. MySQL database, because I did not save that password. Then I go to users, current users, and my user is called Gastel, so I need to change that user's password. I'll just generate a new password and now copy that, use that password, and then change the password. That's my user password. That's what I need to put in right here. Good, save. Let's change the database and the username. I have this. Make sure you use yours. Gas cells, gas cells, gas cells, gas cells. So we are good with that. Now, let's handle the logic for logging in. So I will create a file here called login.php. Login is a read operation. So I'll just get to this, and that's why I said this is very important. Logging in is just reading. So I will copy this read.php, get that piece of code and put it here. The only difference is our reading, let's change this character encoding, has modified the quotation here to a different one. The only difference here is that the kind of reading we are doing uses some values. So we will need to define some values here, the username and the password. The table is called users. So look at how I'm going to do this. We want to define, to receive parameters from anyone who is calling this script. They need to supply the username. So username, our username is actually fauna. We're using the font to log in. It's equals to, okay, we will provide the keys there. Then there is the password. Password. We'll provide the key here. So here we can write phone. Here we have password. Now we are fine. So we now need to modify this script. Meanwhile, when we receive this password, it is not encrypted. And so we cannot compare a password that is not encrypted with the one that is encrypted. So look at the change I'm going to make here. I'm going to declare another variable here. Encrypted password is equals to some encryption function that we are going to call here, and then pass it here. So this function that we are going to specify here will encrypt this password so that we can now compare the two encrypted password without having to decrypt the password that is in the database. I hope we are following. We are using MD5, so let's check how to do that. MD5 encrypt PHP. We just need to call this function, and that's all, MD5, and it will encrypt. So MD5, and that's all. So it will receive this password, encrypt it, and now we have encrypted password. Let's modify this. Select all from username, from users, where phone is equals to phone and password is equals to encrypted password. So that now when we are sending the password, we don't have to encrypt it. This PHP script will take care of that. Meanwhile, this statement looks very good, but when your table has like 1,000 records, there would be a problem. Even after finding the first match, it will continue looking for statements or records that match this. It's good that we limit this to one. In other words, after getting the first person who matches this, stop at that point. Now, this is what we want to do. We want to return success for one, and also the data of this person. So I could call this user data because we will need it in the application. So maybe we can test this script and see whether this is working. I'll now go to Postman and see whether I'm able to log in with this particular user. We know the credentials here, the phone number, and the password. If this login works, then we can implement it in the application, and then we'll be done with that logic. We can go to the next logic, which is displaying all the products that are on sale. Good. Let's okay, still loading. Okay. So it should bring success when this person is logged in, but also bring the data for that particular person. Let's check whether this works. So the folder is gas cells. And the script is log in. The type of call is get. So let's specify some parameters here. First is the phone number. Second is the password. Let me resize this response. Password, phone. Let me check whether I used phone for both the script login. I'm using phone. The column is phone. Let me see whether it's phone here. Perfect. Good. So let's give those parameters here. Phone, the value is 0721 589325, and the password here was 1245 before the encryption. Sorry, I seem to have more parameters. Let me do away with this. Let's send this request. For 4 means the script does not exist. So we really need to check our here. This folder name is incorrect. Good. Success. 1 means that person exists, and then we have their details. Very simple. Let's try changing this password to something that does not exist and see what happens. Say success, but there is no data. Should not say success. So we need to modify our logic so that if this password is incorrect, then it does not bring this. Let's see where we are missing it. Of course, when we put this success here, it will always work because it means this has been executed. You know, when you execute a read, the success of the execution is not when it brings back data, it is when it actually executes or tries to read. So it is not what it reads, it is the fact that it read. That's why it's changing to 1. So before we set flag to 1, we can first check how many records are inside this object. So let's try this. Count number of records in MySQL, really. Records in MySQL. So that if we only modify that if that has in MySQL query read result. We only modify success from 0 to 1 only if that value is greater than 0. We need to get what we are doing. So read MySQL numbers. So this is what I'm looking for. Good. Let's bring it here. So here, put it here, and our results after reading is stored in this object. In fact, instead of doing this, I can just go ahead here and say if this one, because it counts the number of rows, is greater than 0, means 1 and above. If this is so, then modify this. So we want to enclose this here. I hope you get what we are doing. We want to check how many records are in the result object before we modify this so that we only change it to 1 if there is a person who exists with this phone number and this password. Let's now run this again and see what happens. Good. No one exists with that password, and that makes sense. We can now change it to this, and we can now see somebody exists with that, and this is good. Let's now implement this logic or login in our application right here. Excuse me. First, we need to get the packages that we will be using from pub.dev. And in this particular application, we will need two. One is HTTP, and the other one is getX. We have been using that for managing state. So getX this package get it should align with Flutter here. I think they're on the same line. Okay, let's also get HTTP. We will need it for making the internet calls. HTTP, this one. Let's get them. Pubget. Resolving dependencies. Good. We now have these two. Now, what do we need to log in here? I will go to the login screen here. It's still within my main. No problem. You can separate the logic. In your case, we had separated these logics. I think I need to, anyway, I think no need. We can just continue from here. This logic of logging in needs to be implemented right here. So first, let's create text edit controllers to be able to reference whatever the user types here. So let's create that first. In the login class right here, text editing controller phone is equals to text editing controller. We need another one for the password. Please allow me to separate these logics. I want to separate this logic so that we have a class for logging in a different file. Really be useful for us. So lib new. This is where you had where we had said we create different folders. So this folder is called views. So in here we will create a .dat file and call it login. If you're using VS Code, you will need to provide the extension login.dat. Okay. Good. Let's import what we need to import here. And we are fine now. We are okay now. Nothing changes in the application. Everything remains as is, except that we need to come here and then import that file that we've just created. Okay, let's continue here. So phone and password, let's pass this to this text field. Controller. The first one is phone. The second one, we assign it to this controller property. This is the only way we'll be able to reference what details the user is writing here. So password. Okay, I think we can add some text view here. And I know you've already designed this. You've already designed the interface. Just so that it looks better, we can have this here. This is password. I'm refreshing. Okay, we seem to be missing something within the main. Okay. We need this to appear here. Okay, let's continue with the rest of the logic as this loads. So we need a function that communicates to the server and brings back that result that we just saw. These ones are appearing. I feel like pushing them on the extreme side. It's appearing on the extreme on the other side because of this, and I want them to appear on the other side. The only way we can achieve that is by wrapping this with a row, because by default the alignment of the row is on this side. It's on the left. We can just use this simple. Let's create a function here for logging in, which is what we will call here. We can either do it here or design the function outside and then call it here. Maybe we can just do it here. It should just bring a 1 or a 0 if login is successful. Please allow me to do it outside. I don't like mixing this code so that it becomes very hard to read. The return type of this function is future, since we are dealing with a value that we are not so sure when it will come back. It is void. Nothing will be returned. We will process it from there. I'll just call it remote login and then do the work here. Remote login. Good. We are communicating with the server, so we need an object of response, and response is defined in the HTTP class. So response is the object. This is defined in the HTTP class. You see, we have so many packages where that is defined. We have HTTP, we have connect, which is inside get. And this might be very confusing. I have selected the HTTP one. When the program is running, we need to be very specific on where the response class is situated. And so I will write as HTTP so that all the references of the response class that is in HTTP will start with this. And that's what we now need to do here. HTTP dot response, let's make the network call. So response is equals HTTP. Want to call a class called get in HTTP, which requires the URL. And we already have the URL, but before we pass that URL here, we need to convert it from the URI. So pass. This is what we want to do. Good. So let's go to the browser or wherever we have it and then pick this. We can just pick it even with the hard-coded values. So first we are sure it works before we start receiving the values from the text field. Good. Now, this call here to the network is one that we are not sure when it will happen. Excuse me. When we make that call, we are not sure when to expect the data, so we will label it as await. And immediately we make one of the statements in a function await, the function itself becomes async right here. So async, and we are fine. Good. So now what do we do with response? Because when this is executed, the data that will come back, all this data will be stored inside response. We need to process and get to this value. We need to process that and get to the value that says success so that we know whether that is 1 or 2. Good. So right here, we can proceed with the rest of the coding. First, we need to check the server status code. When it responds, what is the status code? So dot status code. If it is 200, can continue with the rest of the processing. If it is not, we need to report that there was an error. And we talked about the server response codes. You are supposed to take time, understand them. That's outside the scope of the class. Print server error. Then we can go ahead and display what that status code is. Why am I using this is a number? Okay, let's not join strings in this manner. Let's use string extrapolation. Okay, so this will print the server status code. What am I missing? We've not closed this string here. Should print the status code of the server in case there is an error, like for anything that is not 200. Now, if it is 200, we still need to extract that value that is stored inside success, this value here, which could be a 0 or a 1. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll just write var server response. This is any variable really, any variable you can use. And since we JSON encoded this string here, look at this, encode JSON that is bringing back all this output, we now need to decode as the first thing here. So I will write JSON. JSON is a class or is inside a class in Flutter or in Dart. So just select that. If it underlines it like this, then we first need to make the import statement. We can ignore this for now. Dot decode. And what are we decoding? This response, but only its body part, because response has many parts. Now that we have the server response decoded, let's extract the part that deals with success only. So var, actually it can be int, login status is equals to, because it's an integer, it's either 0 or 1. And then we pick that key that only references this. Just look at this response again. This is the key. Success is the key from which we can get the value here, which can change from 0 to 1 depending on whether we enter the right or the wrong password. Look at that, it's now 0. I think my internet is gone, as you can see. Okay, we will wait for that to come back. So we are interested in success here. So what do we do with this success? So now we can go again here, an if statement. If logging status is equals to 1, can now navigate to the dashboard. Navigate to dashboard. We can, for now, because we don't have the navigation logic yet, we can print login success. If it is anything else here, else, here we can print username or phone number. Phone number or password is invalid. is invalid. So our login logic looks okay. Remember, we are using hard-coded credentials still, just to first test whether this works. So now let's call this method, this one, inside the button, click here, this one, paste it there. We can now run our program. And see what happens when we click this button here. So let me click this button. It says login success. Very good. Let's try modifying this to something like 9. Oh, still says login success. Huh? Oh, I need to refresh so that it picks the new value. Good. Let's click on this. Let's say phone number or password is invalid. It's just that simple. But let's get these values now from the text field. So from this part here, we can access that. So I just will delete this. I will just delete this. Instead of phone number, I will write phone. Phone there. This is what I mean by phone. This one, text edit controller. So phone dot text. It's important to trim so that if the user leaves some spaces on the right or left, it does not affect the password. I'll do the same here. Password dot text dot trim. This trim can trouble you because if the user writes a password and then they leave some space, that will be treated as a wrong password. Let's run this. Looks like we have a yellow screen here. To deal with this, you can wrap the contents of this body with single child scroll view so that if they are too big, they can scroll. Single child scroll view. Now we don't expect that this contents should show the yellow line. Yes, thank you. Now let's try a password here. Phone 0721589325. Password, correct one, 1245. You need to check it out here because we are not doing anything. You can see it's success. Since we are not navigating, we can just display that here. Let me change this to 9. Says password is invalid. In your case, this would be the place you call the next screen, that is the dashboard. You navigate to dashboard. I think we can pause this here and then continue from this.